WRTV 6.
Now on Indianapolis This Week, the terror attacks in Brussels and the call for more patrols in Muslim neighborhoods.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Democrat Andre Carson talks about the fight against terrorism all around the world. Plus, Senate candidate Todd Young on what he calls the president's failed anti-terror strategy and Indiana's new abortion law that is stirring up controversy all around the country.
From RTV 6, Indianapolis This Week.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week on this Easter Sunday. Our debate also underway right now on Twitter at our account at Indy This Week. And we start by talking about the terror attack in Brussels. Confirmation coming Friday that 2 Americans are among the 31 people who were killed in the attacks in Belgium this week. Police carrying out raids in multiple cities as they try to track down the people behind the attack. It's also prompting renewed talk about the fight against ISIS here in the U.S., including Indiana's Andre Carson, a member of the House Intelligence Committee.
Congressman, thanks so much for joining us here this morning.
Thank you for having me, yeah.
Great to see you. Your reaction when you heard about the bombings in Brussels?
Of course, I was deeply disturbed and saddened. Whenever these kinds of incidences occur, there's always a great deal of rhetoric, anxiety, and angst. Those of us who are working in the intelligence community, we're working very hard with our international partners in trying to thwart any other attempted attacks in the future.
The Intelligence Committee chair said that he believes Americans were targeted. Do you think Americans were targeted?
Very likely. I'm not at liberty to discuss everything that goes on the committee, but I will say that these terrorists who use the language of religion but ultimately have a perverted view of religion in order to seek a political objective must be stopped, and they have to be brought before justice.
Are there active threats against the U.S. right now? Should Americans be concerned?
There are always threats against the United States of America. I'd say for the most part, our larger concern is having people who become self-radicalized, who are going online, looking at videos online and joining chat rooms where anti-American sentiment is very pervasive, and their thoughts and ideas are becoming solidified based on the rhetoric that they're seeing online.
Are you concerned about these reports of waves of ISIS members or ISIS sympathizers flooding now into Europe to join in that fight there?
I'm always concerned. I think that that recruitment effort has waned significantly, and we're seeing a decrease in those who are traveling overseas. Oftentimes, these groups have used false promises to lure would-be followers into their organization, but at the same time, the ISIL threat has to be dismembered. It has to be broken up, and I think that people of goodwill, non-theists, Christians, Muslims, Jewish brothers and sisters, Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists, all have to come together to push back on extremism in any religious form.
Ted Cruz has recently suggested enhanced patrols in Muslim neighborhoods. Your reaction to that idea?
I think it's unpatriotic, it's un-American, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It saddens me even more to hear a son of immigrants espouse these kinds of hateful statements. You know, years ago it was the Jewish community, years ago it was the Irish community, years ago it was the Italian community, it's often the African American community, it's the Latino community. These acts of hateful statements must stop, especially from those who are seeking the highest office in the land.
To that end, Donald Trump has also said that Muslims have looked the other way and maybe not have been as active as they should be in fighting this threat. Your response to him?
Absolutely not. I mean, you know, we're talking about nearly 1,000 New York police officers on the police force, many of whom serve in our military, who are helping to keep New York safe. There are scores of Muslims in our country, in our police departments, in our intelligence communities. I was one of those. I am one of those who are fighting to keep Americans safe. So Mr. Trump is speaking to a part of our society that has anxiety about Muslims. They have anxiety about minorities and even women who are taking a part of the American pie, a larger slice of the American pie. And I think that kind of demagoguery is not reflective of anyone who could be or should be our president.
And a final question to that end. What do those messages from the 2 leading Republicans seeking their party's nomination to become president, what does that say to members of the Islamic community here in America and also to members of the Islamic community all across the world?
I think it's time. One of the things that we've been doing across the country is encouraging Muslim men and women to become a part of the political process. For years, a large part of the Muslim community identified themselves with the Republican Party because you had a large immigrant community who had conservative values. But in a post-9/11 reality, they find themselves marginalized on the outskirts. They find themselves to be outliers, as it were. And so now you have a community that's very educated. They have huge amounts of wealth compared to other communities, and it's time for them to become involved in the political process. For decades, the emphasis has been on engineering, becoming a physician, becoming a lawyer, but now the community has to look very seriously about making investments in the political sphere, regardless of party.
Congressman, I appreciate
An honor, man. Thank you.
Great to see you.
An honor. Thank you. Thank you.
And Senator Dan Coates calling the attack a cowardly attack of violence. He also says the U.S. must take steps to strengthen our border security and entry procedures, and that the battle against terrorism and extremism will not be fought only in the Middle East and cannot be won through diplomacy alone. We're joined this morning by Congressman Todd Young. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Good to see you as always.
Likewise.
In the wake of this week's terror attacks in Brussels, you called on President Obama to abandon his failed strategy and take on a winning one. What is that winning strategy?
Well, I think the best winning strategy is cooperation with our European allies, our NATO allies. There ought to be invocation of Article 5, and the President ought to make clear that if Belgium chooses to invoke Article 5, which is the mutual defense component to the NATO treaty, it was last invoked after 9/11, and basically says when one country is attacked, that means an attack on all. And I think collectively we can put together a winning strategy, which thus far this President has failed to do.
How should the U.S. respond to these attacks, both home and abroad?
Well, our commander-in-chief, first and foremost, needs to acknowledge not just the nature of the threat, but to come up with a coherent strategy, working with our allies. And instead, he went to a baseball game in Cuba, and he's been sightseeing in Argentina. I think instead we're going to need more robust air power. We're going to need to utilize the people on the ground with fewer restrictions so that each of those bombing missions can be more effective. We need more cooperation with other intelligence agencies. I say that as a former Marine Corps intel officer, that if we want a clear picture of where the threat exists and where they might hit next, we're going to have to pool all our intelligence so that we have more resources at our disposal. And the final sort of leg of the national security and homeland security stool is to make sure that there's proper law enforcement assistance to some of these nations like Belgium that clearly could require some.
Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, the two leaders right now for your party's potential nomination to the White House, they had strong words for Muslims this week. Trump saying that they had essentially turned their backs on terrorism and they are turning a blind eye to it. Ted Cruz calling for more patrols in Muslim neighborhoods. Would you be in favor of more patrols in Muslim neighborhoods?
I think what our focus needs to be is on hitting the terrorists overseas as opposed to allowing them to hit us, whether it's in Europe or in the United States. Let's remember, this is the second attack in a European capital in just 4 months. That's on top of San Bernardino and some other episodes we've had in places like Philadelphia. So if we're not actively bringing the fight to the terrorists in the Middle East with the assistance of our NATO allies and all other partners in the region, we're really missing the boat, and this administration needs to do so. The deafening silence I've heard from Democrats, not just our presidential candidates, but also Barron Hill, who's running for this United States Senate seat, is really troubling to me. This ought not be a partisan issue. We need a winning strategy to defeat the terrorists.
Let's talk about President Barack Obama's nomination to the Supreme Court. Should the Senate not vote on Merrick Garland?
Yeah, what the Senate is doing is right now is advising and consenting. That's their constitutional role. They're advising this president that we just won the United States Senate in 2014. The American people spoke, and we don't anticipate coming from this president the sort of nominee that we'd be comfortable with as conservatives. So I agree with Vice President Joe Biden that to have these hearings and then to have a vote during a presidential election year would be unfair to the nominee. It would be unfair to the American people. And frankly, it would be unfair to this president because it would politicize the whole process.
He had backtracked on that when he had made those comments. What about people who say that President Barack Obama, the nation spoke when they elected him the first time and the second time? You would, though, counter and say that Americans elected Republicans in 2014.
Right. Yeah, the American people spoke very clearly just over a year ago, and so we have to respect that part of the process. So let's allow the American people to speak with respect to this Supreme Court justice. Yet another reason I'd communicate to Republicans that this election is so important for United States Senate here in Indiana.
Let's talk about the budget plan now. Will you support the House GOP budget plan as it stands?
You know, I'm still studying the document, but I am troubled by the amount of money that's spent, and I wish there were further progress on bringing into balance programs that are important to Hoosiers, programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. These programs are ultimately going to go insolvent, and we have to act. We have to stop waiting around for others to come up with solutions. This president hasn't led, and I wanted, frankly, bolder action in the House on this front.
Let's talk about your ongoing race, of course, with Congressman Marlin Stutzman. There's an ad out right now where you claim that he has kind of adopted the old President Barack Obama Chicago-style politics. With everything that happened about the debate about having your name on the ballot and whether or not there were enough signatures, has the race turned personal, not just political at this point?
No, it really hasn't. I'm still out there talking about the issues that matter to Hoosiers, making sure that we have quality education for our kids that turn into good-paying jobs and lead to meaningful careers, making sure that Hoosiers are safe and secure, and that's going to remain the focus of my campaign. Clearly, the Democrats don't want to run against me. They've made that very clear, which is why they filed this lawsuit. It was disappointing. I've made no secret of my disappointment in the fact that my colleague Marlin Stutzman joined the Democrats in piling on in this lawsuit.
Congressman, great to see you. Happy Easter to you and your family.
All right, thanks so much. Likewise.
Yeah. And still to come, Governor Pence signs dozens of bills into law, including road funding and the elimination of I-STEP. But it's one bill gaining national attention. We talk about that next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV 6.
$1,000.
And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We turn now to Governor Pence signing one of the most restrictive abortion bills into law. He's calling it an important step to protecting the unborn. But the law is already facing an immediate challenge from its opponents. Our Katie Hines explains.
Planned Parenthood wants to block the new restrictions on abortion from taking effect, and the organization is working with the ACLU on the effort.
Indiana is already one of the 4 worst states in the country in terms of reproductive health care and access to the constitutionally protected right for a woman to have an abortion. And this bill just puts us probably over the top.
It cleared its final hurdle in the General Assembly by a 60-40 vote after a lengthy, emotional debate on the House floor, one that ended with some pro-life Republican women voting against the bill. Governor Pence calls it a comprehensive pro-life measure. In a statement, he says, "I believe that a society can be judged by how it deals with its most vulnerable, the aged, the infirm, the disabled, and the unborn." House Enrolled Act 1337 will ensure the dignified final treatment of the unborn and prohibits abortions that are based only on the unborn child's sex, race, color, national origin, ancestry, or disability, including Down syndrome. Jason.
Thank you, Katie, and we want to welcome in our wonderful political insiders on this Easter Sunday morning, Laura Beck and Pete C. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about this abortion bill now. The bill itself, does it help or hurt Pence going forward to November? Pete?
Well, I think there are certainly some people who wish it didn't come in an election year, but you can't really control what bills are submitted on behalf of different legislators. But this is also very predictable what happened. A pro-life governor signed pro-life legislation, and pro-choice advocates are attacking him. There's nothing surprising about that. It's getting national attention because people want to use it as an election year issue.
And speaking of that national attention, we've got a tweet from Bernie Sanders. He tweeted immediately in the wake of the signature, "The decision to have an abortion is for a woman to make, not for the governor of Indiana." So while the bill might help him with Republicans, what does this do for him going forward, Laura, and what does it do for the reputation of the state of Indiana 1 year after RFRA?
Well, I think it actually probably is going to help Governor Pence with his base. You know, there are people who are going to support him no matter what he does, and they've supported him on RFRA. They're going to support him on this. I think what it does is it does turn an eye nationally to Indiana and to some of the the policies that our predominantly male legislators and male governor have pursued as it relates to women's issues and to diverse communities. But one of the challenges with a law like this, which it sounds like it'll be challenged in court anyway, is that when you put forth something like this, and there were a number of Republican female legislators who spoke out against it and voted against it, is that we have very little opportunities economically for people with disabilities in this state. And it's nationally, it's an issue. People with disabilities are, they are less employed. They don't have a high rate of employment or post-secondary education opportunities. So when you do something like this, there really needs to be an effort as to how do we help families in our state? How do we help people look at how we find viable options and viable economic opportunity and educational opportunities? And we didn't see that with this.
Let's jump over to the presidential race. From this Easter Sunday morning for the next 9 days, there is no Republican debate. There is no Republican primary until we get to
Hallelujah.
Wisconsin.
Yeah. Hallelujah.
1 week
We're here.
Tuesday.
Celebrate, all right?
We've
March
seen,
Madness.
We've
That's all
seen
we're
this
gonna do.
Twitter debate between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump play out over their wives, bringing their wives into the fray now, with 9 days to really not hold this in at all. Nothing to hold it in at all. Where does this race go from here right now, Pete?
It's just going to get crazier, and hopefully come to Indiana. But you know, you don't touch wives, you don't touch children.
No.
They should not be a part of this debate. I think what we're seeing, though, Donald Trump has always believed himself to be a sacred cow, that he can't be touched. In the end, he's a paper tiger. He's waiting for an excuse to lash out at his opponents, and that's what he's doing with this super PAC that's not directed by the Cruz campaign. They're doing their own stuff. It's a slippery slope, though, the way this whole system works. They did something they shouldn't have done, and now Donald Trump is trying to take advantage of it.
All bets are off, Laura?
Well, I was going to say I agree with Pete on Donald Trump. I mean, I think it's just a caricature of itself, and I can assure you that we are not going to be tweeting about our spouses and negatively at all.
They both appreciate that, actually.
I'm a big fan of Pete's wife, but at the same time, I think that it is just becoming so negative and so nasty, particularly on the Republican side, that it's turning people off.
And probably more to come.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Finally, on this Easter Sunday, if I were to give you a Peep or a Cadbury cream egg, which would you prefer?
A Peep.
The egg.
The egg. Debate them on Twitter right now at Indy This Week. Thank you for being here. Happy Easter
Thank you.
to you
Happy
both.
Easter.
Still to come here, an RTV6 exclusive. The head of IPL talks about increasing your monthly bill and the work to prevent those underground explosions. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. On Indianapolis This Week, the top executive at IPL talking about your monthly bill and the rate increase approved by state regulators. The amount only about half of what the company had wanted. So what does that mean for IPL's plans? Rafael Sanchez went to their headquarters to find out.
Sir, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here. Thank you.
You did not get the rate increase you wanted. Will this in any way impact customer service or maintenance of the system?
No, absolutely. You know, at IPL, we've always had high reliability. We'll continue to have reliability. We take pride in that. It's something that who we are as a company, and it's totally separate from the amount that we got in the rate case. You take a look at our people at IPL and at AES, and our people, that is our current employees as well as retirees, take tremendous pride in the service we provide to the people in this community, and we'll continue to do so. So that doesn't change at all.
But you asked for a certain amount because you needed it for certain reasons. It's the first rate hike since 1995-96. Well, you have to ask the parent company AES for some extra funding since you didn't get the amount you wanted?
No, it's, you know, you take a look, when you put together a rate case, you try to balance high reliability, you try to balance low prices, sustainable on the environmental side, and a fair return to the shareholders, and that's what you put together. You know, we don't agree with all the components of the decision, but at the end of the day, you got to respect the Commission's decision. You respect the process for it. You know, we invested in the state for the long haul. IPL has been here for 90 years. AES has been here now for 15 years or so. And this is for the long haul. We believe in the state. We believe in the business, the environment that it is here, and the regulatory process. And over time, you just believe those things will all even out.
The folks that speak for the consumer, the Office of the Utility Consumer, called the rate request, in their words, misguided leadership, misplaced priorities.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously disagree, and we don't believe there's any basis for what they said. You know, and again, they take a position that they do, and we respect their part of the process. But I think ultimately the decision that the Commission came out to was very much akin to what was appropriate, and I don't think that the Commission agreed with those statements either at the end of the day.
this company has been dealing with these underground situations, incidents for the past 5 years. The IORC also closed its investigation on the underground incident, saying that the system was safe, but also wanting to make sure that the company continues to provide them with any information on irregularities. What is your commitment? Because we've often talked, you and I have talked about that you believe that the downtown system, in your words, is reliable and safe, but what more will you do to ensure that that's the case?
Yeah, we're continuing to do a number of things. You know, for instance, we are the first city in the United States, and I believe the only city in the world right now that has 100% of their manholes with locking covers. You know, so we did that. Right now we're experimenting with some other things. It's, you know, I think most people know that we have the second largest steam system in the world that's in the downtown network with us. We share that space. So one of the things we're doing is we're looking to see if we can't monitor temperatures, and so we can have some early indications of there might be some issues. We're testing a new type of cable that's high temperature resistant. So doing a number of things. But I think that one of the keys is to continue to inform the commission, to work with them. You know, I believe we're very good at what we do. We try hard, but we also want to get better at what we do. And whether that can get better through communications with the commission, from consultants, from other companies, we'll continue to evolve, continue to look at ways to do things better than what we do today.
Sir, thank you for your time. We appreciate you for joining us on the program. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to you both. There's still one big question, of course, about the rate hike. Exactly how much more you're going to have to pay each month. State regulators are expected to approve or reject that number sometime later this week. You're watching Indianapolis This Week, only on RTV 6. Thank you so much for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week. Kids, good luck on those Easter egg hunts out there. Enjoy those Peeps jelly beans and Cadbury cream eggs. For Raphael, Katie Hines, and our entire team, have a wonderful Easter Sunday, everyone.